The morning train from Porto to Coimbra carried Peter and João through the Portuguese countryside, following the path of the Douro River before turning inland toward the ancient university city. Peter had spent the previous evening in deep conversation with João about the network's Portuguese operations, and he had agreed to visit Coimbra before making his final decision about accepting his inheritance. Coimbra is special to Portuguese hearts, João explained as the train approached the city. It was our capital before Lisbon, and its university has educated Portuguese leaders for over 700 years. But more importantly for your family's story, Coimbra has always been a place where knowledge is preserved and secrets are kept safe. As they emerged from the train station, Peter was immediately struck by how different Coimbra felt from Porto. Where Porto had been commercial and maritime, oriented toward the ocean and international trade, Coimbra was academic and contemplative, built around the hilltop university that dominated the city's skyline like a fortress of learning. The streets leading up toward the university were filled with students wearing traditional black capes, a custom that dated back centuries and gave the city an almost medieval atmosphere. Bookstores, cafes, and small restaurants catered to generations of scholars who had made Coimbra their intellectual home. "Your grandfather loved this city," João said as they climbed the steep streets toward the historic center. "He visited at least once a year, sometimes more often. He said that Coimbra reminded him that knowledge and tradition could coexist with progress and change." Peter felt a pang of emotion at the mention of his grandfather. The quiet man he had known in Chicago seemed to have lived an entirely different life that his family had never suspected. "Did he ever mention me during these visits?" "Often," João replied with a gentle smile. "He talked about his grandson who asked too many questions, who noticed details that other people missed, who seemed restless with ordinary life. He said you reminded him of himself at your age." They checked into a small hotel near the Praça da República, in the heart of the student district. From their rooms, Peter could hear the sounds of young people going about their daily routines, heading to classes, meeting friends at cafes, discussing ideas and dreams with the passionate intensity that universities around the world inspired. After settling in, João led Peter on a walking tour of the city, explaining how Coimbra's layout reflected centuries of Portuguese history. The lower town, along the Mondego River, was where the common people had always lived and worked. The upper town, dominated by the university, represented the intellectual and spiritual aspirations that had driven Portugal's age of exploration and discovery. The University of Coimbra was founded in 1290, João explained as they approached the main gates. It's one of the oldest universities in continuous operation in the world. Many of Portugal's greatest navigators, scientists, and leaders studied here. The university complex was breathtaking, a collection of buildings that spanned centuries of architectural styles, from medieval stone structures to Baroque churches to neoclassical academic halls. But the crown jewel was clearly the Biblioteca Joanina, the magnificent Baroque library that João said they would visit the next day. "Your grandfather had special access to the library's restricted collections," João explained. "The Mateus family has been benefactors of the university for centuries, and that relationship has given your family access to resources that aren't available to ordinary researchers." That evening, they had dinner at a traditional restaurant called Zé Manuel dos Ossos, a tiny establishment so authentic that there was no written menu. The waiter simply recited what had been cooked that day, over plates of chanfana and glasses of Dao wine. João began to prepare Peter for what he would discover the next day. "Your grandfather left something for you in Coimbra," João said carefully. "Something personal, meant only for you to find when you were ready to understand your family's legacy." "What kind of something?" "A message, an explanation, perhaps even a justification for choices he made that affected your life without your knowledge." Peter felt his appetite diminish as the significance of João's words sank in. "When did he leave this message?" "About 5 years before his death. He was already ill, but his mind was still sharp. He knew that you would eventually come to Portugal seeking answers, and he wanted to ensure that you heard certain truths from him directly rather than from others who might have different agendas." The next morning, João arranged for a private tour of the Biblioteca Joanina before the library opened to regular tourists. The head librarian, a distinguished woman named Dr. Helena Rodriguez, greeted them personally and seemed to have been expecting their visit. "Mr. Matthews," she said in excellent English, "your grandfather was a dear friend to this library for many decades. We were very sad to learn of his passing, and we have been waiting for you to come claim what he left in our care." The library itself was one of the most beautiful spaces Peter had ever seen. 3 magnificent halls were lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books, their gilded spines creating a tapestry of knowledge that stretched back centuries. Baroque decorations covered every surface, painted ceilings depicting allegories of learning and wisdom, intricate woodwork that spoke of master craftsmen, and reading tables made from exotic woods brought from Portuguese colonies. The library contains over 60,000 volumes, Dr. Rodriguez explained as she led them through the main halls. Many are extremely rare, and some are the only surviving copies of important historical works. But we also maintain a special collection of materials that have been placed in our care by Portuguese families for safekeeping. She led them to a private study room off the main library halls, a small chamber that was clearly used for examining rare materials and conducting sensitive research. On the study table sat a single book, a beautiful 18th century edition of Os Lusíadas, Portugal's national epic poem written by Luís de Camões. "Your grandfather placed this volume in our care 15 years ago," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "He gave very specific instructions that it should only be released to Peter Matthews, grandson of Thomas Matthews, when that person came to Coimbra seeking information about the Mateus family." Peter approached the book with trembling hands. "He knew I would come here?" "He was quite certain of it. He said that you were too curious and too intelligent to simply accept the inheritance without seeking to understand its origins and meaning." Dr. Rodriguez excused herself to give Peter privacy, explaining that she would be available if he needed anything. João moved to leave as well, but Peter asked him to stay. "What do you think Peter's grandfather wrote in this message he left 15 years ago? Could he have predicted everything that's happened to Peter on this journey? Share your thoughts in the comments." Peter opened Os Lusíadas carefully, aware that he was handling a valuable historical artifact. The book fell open naturally to Canto 3, where a folded letter had been inserted between the pages. The envelope was addressed in his grandfather's distinctive handwriting, "For Peter Matthews, when the time comes." With hands that shook slightly, Peter opened the envelope and began to read. "My dear Peter, if you are reading this letter, then you have traveled much further than the distance from Chicago to Portugal. You have journeyed through our family's history, discovered secrets that we kept hidden to protect you, and arrived at the moment where you must decide whether to accept a legacy that stretches back over 500 years. I want you to know that everything your grandmother and I told you about our simple life in Chicago was true. We were just ordinary people trying to live quietly and raise our family in peace. But we were also the American coordinators of a network that has been protecting people and preserving knowledge since 1487, and that dual existence required constant vigilance and many difficult choices. I didn't tell you about your inheritance when you were young because I wanted you to develop your own identity, your own values, your own sense of who you wanted to be. Too many children born into families like ours become trapped by expectations and responsibilities before they have a chance to discover themselves. But I watched you carefully as you grew, Peter. I saw your curiosity about how things worked, your ability to notice patterns that others missed, your natural skill at understanding what people really wanted beneath what they said they wanted. These are the qualities that have made Mateus family members effective guardians of the network for generations. I also saw your strong sense of justice, your discomfort with dishonesty, and your desire to make your own way in the world rather than accepting inherited privilege. These qualities worried me, because they suggested you might reject the inheritance entirely once you learned about its moral complexities. The network your ancestors created is not simple or pure. It has saved thousands of lives over the centuries, but it has also operated outside legal frameworks and sometimes cooperated with morally questionable partners in order to protect its humanitarian mission. You will have to make peace with this complexity if you choose to accept leadership of the Portuguese branch. I am writing this letter 5 years before I expect to die, which means I still have time to change course if circumstances warrant. But I believe with all my heart that you are the right person to inherit this responsibility. You have the intelligence to understand the network's operations, the compassion to maintain its humanitarian focus, and the independence to resist pressures from those who would use the network for purely selfish purposes. There are people who will try to manipulate you, Peter. Some will emphasize the humanitarian achievements to make the inheritance seem noble and necessary. Others will emphasize the moral compromises to make you feel guilty about accepting it. Both perspectives are true, but neither tells the complete story. The truth is this: the network exists because the official institutions of governments and organizations often fail to protect the people who most need protection. We operate in the spaces that laws and regulations cannot reach, helping people who fall through the cracks of official systems. This work is important, but it comes with risks and responsibilities that not everyone can handle. If you are reading this in Coimbra, then João Tavares has brought you here as I instructed. You can trust João completely. He has been my partner in the Portuguese operations for over 30 years, and he understands both the opportunities and the dangers of the network better than anyone else I know. I want you to also know about Klaus Weber. His family has worked with ours for generations, and Klaus himself is brilliant and dedicated to the network's mission. But Klaus's branch of the operation has developed different priorities over the years, focusing more on financial preservation than humanitarian assistance. This doesn't make him your enemy, but it does mean you should be careful about whose vision for the network's future you choose to support. My advice to you, Peter, is this: accept the inheritance, but accept it on your own terms. The network needs leadership that can balance humanitarian goals with practical survival, that can preserve the past while adapting to the future, and that can resist the temptation to use accumulated power for personal gain. Your grandmother and I loved you very much, and we were very proud of the man you became even without knowing about your heritage. Whatever you decide about the inheritance, know that you have already exceeded our hopes for you. Be brave, be honest, and trust your instincts. With all my love, your grandfather Thomas Matthews, Tomas Mateus. Peter read the letter 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of meaning and emotion. His grandfather's voice came through so clearly in the words that he could almost hear the old man speaking them, with the same gentle wisdom that had characterized their conversations during Peter's childhood. He knew, Peter said finally, looking up at João with tears in his eyes. He knew exactly what I would go through, what questions I would have, what doubts I would face. João nodded with visible emotion. Your grandfather understood you better than you realized. He spent years planning how to guide you toward this moment without forcing you into choices you weren't ready to make. The letter mentions you specifically. He said, I can trust you completely. As you can, João replied. Thomas and I worked together for over 3 decades. He taught me that the network's greatest asset isn't its accumulated wealth or its historical connections. It's the trust between people who share a commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Peter carefully returned the letter to its envelope and placed it in his jacket pocket. I need to think about all this. Is there somewhere we can go that's less formal than a library? João smiled. I know exactly the place. Your grandfather's favorite cafe in Coimbra. They left the university and walked down into the lower town, eventually arriving at a magnificent old cafe housed in the former refectory of a medieval monastery. The Café Santa Cruz was a grand space with high vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows, and marble tables where students and locals had gathered for over a century. Your grandfather sat at that table every time he visited Coimbra, João said, pointing to a corner spot near one of the large windows. He said the light was perfect for reading, and the coffee was strong enough to keep an old man alert. They ordered bica and pastéis de nata, and Peter found himself looking around the cafe with new understanding. This had been part of his grandfather's life, part of the world he inhabited when he wasn't being a quiet bookkeeper in Chicago. How many other sacred spaces had the old man visited? How many other lives had he touched while maintaining the fiction of an ordinary existence? Thank you for staying with us through this emotional revelation. Peter's grandfather's letter explained so much about the journey and the choices ahead. The wisdom and love in those words are incredibly moving. What do you think Peter will decide now that he's heard directly from his grandfather? As they sat in the cafe, João began to share more stories about Thomas Matthews, stories about his wit, his kindness, his occasional stubbornness, and his deep commitment to the network's humanitarian mission. Peter listened hungrily, discovering dimensions of his grandfather that had been hidden behind the modest persona he had shown his American family. He talked often about the guilt he felt for keeping secrets from your grandmother and your mother, Joao said. But he believed it was necessary to protect them. The network has enemies, Peter. People who would have used his family as leverage if they had known about his activities. What kind of enemies? Governments that don't like unregulated international financial networks. Criminal organizations that want access to the network's smuggling routes for their own purposes. Collectors who believe that historical artifacts belong to whoever can take them, not to the cultures that created them. Peter thought about the threatening messages he had received, the mysterious figures who had followed him from city to city, and the pressure that Klaus had applied in La Rioja. Am I in danger by accepting this inheritance? You're in danger either way, Joao replied honestly. You know too much to simply walk away now. The only question is whether you accept the inheritance and gain access to the network's protection and resources, or whether you try to live with the knowledge you've acquired while having no support from the people who could help keep you safe. The pragmatic assessment helped Peter think more clearly about his situation. His grandfather's letter had provided emotional context, but Joao was offering practical analysis. Together, they painted a picture of an inheritance that was neither purely noble nor completely compromising, but rather a complex responsibility that required constant moral navigation. Joao, my grandfather's letter suggested that I should accept the inheritance on my own terms. What does that mean in practice? It means you can choose which aspects of the network's operations you want to emphasize and which you want to reform or eliminate. As the Mateus family inheritor, you would have significant influence over how the Portuguese operations are conducted. You wouldn't be obligated to simply continue everything exactly as it has been done for centuries. And Klaus's branch? How would they respond to changes I might want to make? Joao's expression became more guarded. That would depend on what changes you propose. The different branches of the network cooperate because it's in everyone's interest, but there are also tensions between those who prioritize humanitarian assistance and those who focus on financial preservation. Your choices could tip the balance one way or another. Peter spent the rest of the day walking through Coimbra, thinking about everything he had learned and everything he still didn't understand. He visited the botanical garden where university students studied amid exotic plants brought from former Portuguese colonies. He sat in the cathedral where generations of Portuguese monarchs had been crowned. He watched the sunset from the university's tower, looking out over a city that had educated explorers who literally changed the world's map. Everywhere he went, Peter thought about his grandfather's letter and the choice it presented. He could accept the inheritance and become the leader of an international network that had been operating for over 500 years. Or he could try to walk away from a legacy that was already shaping his life whether he accepted it or not. By evening, Peter knew what his decision would be. He called Joao and asked to meet again at Café Santa Cruz, at his grandfather's favorite table. I've made my decision, Peter said once they were settled with their coffee. I'm going to accept the inheritance, but with conditions. Joao leaned forward attentively. What conditions? First, I want complete transparency about all of the network's current operations. No more surprises, no more convenient omissions, no more discoveries of activities that I should have known about from the beginning. That can be arranged. Second, I want a full review of the network's financial activities to ensure that we're actually using our resources for humanitarian purposes rather than just accumulating wealth for its own sake. Joao nodded approval. Your grandfather would have supported that condition completely. Third, I want the Portuguese operations to have more autonomy from Klaus's branch. I don't trust his motivations, and I don't want the humanitarian mission to be compromised by purely financial interests. That will cause tension, Joao warned, but it's a reasonable position and one that the Portuguese Council will likely support. And finally, Peter continued, I want to modernize how the network operates. The world has changed since 1487. We should be using contemporary methods and technologies to achieve our goals, not just relying on traditions because that's how things have always been done. Joao smiled broadly. Peter, you sound exactly like your grandfather when he first took on leadership responsibilities. He also wanted to reform and modernize, and he succeeded in making significant changes while preserving the network's core mission. So you'll support my conditions? I'll support them enthusiastically, and I believe most of the Portuguese Council will as well. Peter felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Then I guess I should make some phone calls, starting with Klaus. Peter stepped outside the cafe to make the call, wanting privacy for what would likely be a difficult conversation. Klaus answered on the second ring, his voice tense with anticipation. Peter, where are you? We've been trying to reach you for days. I'm in Coimbra, Klaus, and I've made my decision about the inheritance. And I'm accepting it. I'll take leadership of the Portuguese operations and my position in the broader network. There was a long pause before Klaus responded. That's excellent news, Peter. We're very pleased that you've decided to embrace your family's legacy. But there are conditions, Peter continued. The Portuguese operations will maintain significant autonomy. I'll be implementing reforms to ensure that humanitarian goals take priority over financial accumulation. And I expect complete transparency about all network activities going forward. Another pause, this one more tense. Those are significant changes to propose before you've even formally accepted your inheritance. They're not proposals, Klaus. They're requirements. My grandfather's letter made it clear that I should accept the inheritance on my own terms, and these are my terms. Your grandfather's letter? Klaus's voice sharpened with interest. What letter? One he left for me 15 years ago in Coimbra. He had quite a bit to say about the different branches of the network and their competing priorities. Klaus was silent for several moments. I see. Well, Peter, I look forward to discussing these requirements with you in person. Perhaps we should arrange a meeting of all the network's branch leaders to discuss how to integrate you into the existing structure. That sounds like a good idea, but Klaus, I want you to understand that I'm not interested in being integrated into the existing structure. I'm interested in reforming that structure to better serve the network's humanitarian mission. We'll see, Klaus replied, his tone revealing both respect and concern. Congratulations on your decision, Peter. You're now part of something much larger than yourself. After ending the call with Klaus, Peter made another call, this one to the main Portuguese Council office that João had told him about. He introduced himself formally, confirmed his decision to accept the inheritance, and requested a meeting with the full council to discuss his vision for the network's future. The council secretary, clearly prepared for his call, scheduled a meeting for the following week in Porto and expressed the council's enthusiasm about welcoming a Mateus family member back into active leadership after several years of interim management. When Peter returned to Café Santa Cruz, João was waiting with 2 glasses of port wine. A proper Portuguese toast, he explained, for celebrating important decisions. To your grandfather, João said, raising his glass, who planned this moment carefully enough that you could make a truly informed choice. To my grandfather, Peter agreed, and to the network's future, whatever that might look like. As they sipped their wine in the grand old cafe where his grandfather had once sat contemplating his own responsibilities, Peter felt a sense of peace that had eluded him since leaving Chicago. He had made his choice not out of pressure or manipulation, but out of genuine understanding of what his inheritance meant and what he wanted it to become. The journey that had started with a mysterious woman in a Madrid airport had led him through Spanish cities full of secrets, across the border into his ancestral homeland, and finally to this quiet moment in a Coimbra cafe where past and future converged. Peter Matthews had become Peter Mateus, accepting a legacy that stretched back 500 years, while preparing to transform it for the centuries ahead. Thank you for staying with us through this incredible emotional journey in Coimbra. Peter's grandfather's letter provided the clarity and confidence he needed to make his decision. The wisdom of a man who understood both the burden and the blessing of their family legacy helped Peter see that accepting the inheritance doesn't mean accepting everything exactly as it was. Peter has made his choice. He will lead the Portuguese operations, but on his own terms. Humanitarian goals will take priority over financial accumulation. Transparency will replace secrets, and modern methods will update ancient traditions. But Klaus's response suggests that not everyone in the network will be happy with Peter's reformist vision. The tension between different branches of the operation is about to become much more explicit, and Peter will need to prove that his youth and inexperience don't disqualify him from the leadership role he's claiming. What do you think will happen when Peter meets with the full council? Will they support his vision for reform, or will established interests resist his attempts to change how things have been done for centuries? And how will Klaus respond when he realizes that Peter isn't going to be the easily manipulated inheritor he might have hoped for? Don't miss the next episode where Peter's journey continues in Lisbon and where new challenges will test his commitment to the path he's chosen. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of this incredible saga. Peter has accepted his destiny, but the real work is only beginning.